All right. Welcome, Dani and Irtefa, to today's interview from Product Manager Thought Collectives. Usually, we kind of get started by talking about updates. So the first question I have for you two would be like, how would you give some recent updates or introduction about yourself as if you were talking to an old friend?
Irtefa, you want to start?
Um, yeah. Um, Introduction, how I was talking to older friends. I'm one of the co-founders of Jam. My other co-founder is also on the pod, Danny. Um, we started the company about 3 years ago, and so far it's been a crazy ride where after we launched the product, we started with just like 10 people, beta testing with them. And once we found something that, hey, like this is gonna work, let's scale it up. And in that year and a half, we've grown from like zero to more than 65,000 users, which is pretty crazy.
Irtefa is bearing the lead. It's a record week at Jam. We're recording this on a Friday, and we're just finishing an all-time record amount of usage, which is really cool. But the reason why it's extra cool is, like happiness is like reality minus expectations. We we thought January would be a slow month for us just because people are sort of ramping up back work. And Jam is a tool that people use to report issues back to engineers. We thought like, oh, like people sort of get back to work, engineers will start building, and then there will be issues to report. And so the fact that it's actually like usage is back and more than ever. Anyway, Ertif is bearing the lead. It's a really exciting week this week.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Yeah, so Danny, is there anything else you want to add about your recent updates or introduction?
Just moved back to San Francisco, and the energy here, especially around AI, is out of this world.
Definitely, definitely. That's amazing. Yeah, I went to one of the events you organized about fundraising. That was really awesome. I'll try to come to future events. I think you guys are doing a great job doing like outreaching and then share your learnings and wisdom on LinkedIn and other social media. Definitely love those. So three of us have something in common. At least you two started also as a product manager, but now you guys are founders. So I want to hear more about what what were your PM journeys at Cloudflare, and that's how you met, right? You guys were both PMs at Cloudflare.
Yeah, we were, yeah, you're absolutely right. When you're starting in product, it's one of those roles where someone needs to take a chance on you. You probably are coming from a different industry or a different role. For me, it was engineering. I had no
Mm-hmm.
product experience other than just working with product managers and like shipping features as an engineer. But I really wanted to see how the rest of the team operated and from the perspective of a product manager. And I was looking for a job, and then our former manager, Dane Connect at Cloudflare, he took a chance on me. And in those moments where it's like, you have no product experience, you haven't done this before, but I'm seeing something in you that, maybe you have potential, maybe you'll become good someday. That's what you need at that point. And that's what happened to me at Cloudflare. And that's how I started PM and his team. And then when I joined, it was a much smaller company. Uh, Closely worked with Danny, where we launched a bunch of different products together. Some of them were colossal failures, and some of them are now multi-$100 million businesses, which is really exciting to see. And then throughout that process, uh, got to see Cloudflare go public, which was really cool to see as well. And then about 3 years ago, Danny and I we reunited and started this company.
Nice. So Danny, do you have a similar journey? You also came from an engineering background. And you joined Cloudflare as a PM.
So was never an engineer that shipped any code to production. Took a few CS classes in college. Um, exactly as Artifa said, to become a PM, someone needs to take a chance on you. I was fresh out of NYU, had never had, like, I'd had internships, but never a full time job. And
Mhm.
Cloudflare took a chance, and I was so grateful. Joined at around 100 people, left at around 1,000.
Wow.
Um, and I was just so freaking lucky to get to learn from such a world class management team. Like, um, that's an amazing company and super smart, hardworking, kind people run it. And gosh, what a first job. Um, Interestingly, I actually got this job by sending a cold email. So not only did they take a chance, they took a chance on a stranger.
Mm.
And I think that, you know, the opportunity to work there was like what it was career changing and life changing for me. And for anyone listening who's thinking like, I want to make the switch to product, or want to make a career switch, I just totally recommend sending out cold emails. You never know. I published recently a screenshot of that email on my Twitter just in case it's helpful for anyone. So if you want a template to follow that's worked at least once, search for cold email on my Twitter.
Sounds good. I'll make sure I link that in our transcript later. So you guys were on the same team, and you guys both were product managers. But how did you come up with the concept of Jam? How did it happen? What's the origin story?
We were so freaking lucky. We worked on this super fast paced, very ambitious team. So the role of our team was to launch net new businesses for the company that were big risks, but also big opportunities. And so we got to launch sort of these greenfield products that had to work great out of the gate. And then if they worked in market, they would be passed on to the core team to maintain and run. And then if they did not pan out, they would just be sunsetted quickly and we'd move on. But it was there, the two of us as PMs working with 30 engineers trying to move really fast and ship great work out the door, that we just felt frustrated with the slow communication cycles that happen in product development. I mean, this was the fastest moving team at one of the fastest moving and growing companies in the Silicon Valley. And even we were frustrated with the communication, like the ways of communicating between product and engineering. And what we saw happen over and over again is we as PMs wanted to empower engineers to move fast, but we almost never were able to give engineers all the information that they needed up front to solve an issue. So they would like comment in the Jira ticket. We would see it the next day when we checked our email, we'd answer. And so engineers are just sitting there blocked. And so that's what Jam solves today. It removes that slow communication cycle by allowing anyone, no matter their technical background, to give engineers all the information they need up front to debug and fix some issue. So imagine you're the PM for a feature and you're dogfooding it because you're the number one fan of your product, and you run into something weird happened. You just click on Jam. It's connected to your browser. It's connected to DevTools. And it copies to your clipboard a link to share with engineers that when they open, includes all of the application in the browser state. So they can just start debugging. It's like they were right there in the browser. And that way teams can move faster and PMs and engineers can work better together. So that's where Jam came from.
That's amazing. So Irtefa, how did you get started with Jam? So I imagine you guys are on the same team. Did you happen to have the exact same pain point? Or like, how did that happen? It's like, hey, let's build something. Because I see a frustrated pain point here.
Yeah. When we started working on it right before, like Dani was actually working at USV, like she left a year before that, but we still kept in touch, and we would work on like side projects together. We even took a trip to like Colorado and like rented a cabin to just work on some like ideas just for fun.
Yeah.
And then right before starting the company, we were just catching up. I didn't go into the call thinking that, hey, I'm gonna start this company right now.
Okay.
But that's kind of like sort of what happened. Like when we hopped on the call, before Dani can share with me like how she's been doing and all that stuff, I started complaining about all the things that Dani was talking about earlier, where about like the feedback loop and engineers not having all the information that they need to like solve problems. It was because like I just launched a complete new product and I was like frustrated by how slow the communication loops were. And I was just ranting about it to Dani, and Dani is like, yeah, maybe we should build it. It's like, and for context, like I was in vacation back then.
Okay.
I wasn't planning to like work on this thing. I was just planning to like chill out, have a good time. But in a way we did. Like we started coding, and Dani mentioned earlier, she hasn't pushed code to production, but that's actually not true anymore. Like when we first started Jam, we're the only people who are like working on it.
Mm.
and Danny pushed a bunch of code to production. So that has changed. So like that call like changed the trajectory of our lives,
Yeah.
where we started on this like hackathon, and then Danny uh, connected with like 50 product managers, engineers, and designers, and wanted to show what we were building.
Mm.
And it was a working prototype, and people really like resonated with it when we hopped on these calls with them. And that end of that week on that Sunday, then I drove up to my manager's house, who's a person who like hired us back then, and I
Yeah.
basically asked for his blessing to like go ahead and like start this company with Danny.
That's amazing. Wow, what an awesome, wholesome story. That's awesome. So you guys are co-founders and you guys were both product managers. So what are some of the biggest challenge you want to share for you two to run the company together?
I am the luckiest person in the world. Like when you imagine your dream co-founder, it's someone who you trust 100%, who pushes you to be better, who gives you
Yep.
the feedback that you need to hear, and who has growth mindset, curiosity, and will jump in with you, like, let's go, whatever is the next thing that needs to be figured out and done. And Irtefa is those things. The thing that everyone who's ever worked with Irtefa will say about, like, I've heard so many people say this about Irtefa, is one of the things that's really stand out. I'm gonna make him so uncomfortable on this. I'm so sorry, Irtefa, but the world must know. So one of the things that's really like different about Irtefa and so stellar is he's a lifelong learner, and what I mean by that is it's not uncommon for us to have a problem we don't know how to solve. And for the
Mhm.
next day, I'll talk to Irtefa and he's taking an online course about it, or he's had a couple calls with people who are experts and has learned a lot from them and has things to share. And he does that not just at Jam, but he's done that in jobs before. And that's like a thing that I've heard from so many people around him. Um, a lot of people start companies with strangers because they're looking for someone who has a different skill set to them.
Mm.
And I think that that is crazy. I think that the way that we talk about co-founders is we talk about it like we're looking to divide and conquer the work, but that's what
Mhm.
the whole team, you're going to hire a lot of people and you're going to divide and conquer the work with them. That's what the team is for.
Yeah.
But a co-founder is like, you shoulder the responsibility together. Like together, you take on more responsibility than maybe you've taken on your entire life. And
Yeah.
you're the team that's going to hold that up together. It's like you really need to know that person, trust them, and like it's like be aligned on your values and what you want, how you want to approach things in life. It's just very different.
Yeah. So actually from your side, as a very extraordinary co-founder, what are some challenges you are having right now? Running the company side by side with Danny.
Hmm. You know what's really, I'll flip that for a second.
Hmm.
One of the really exciting things about starting a company and building it with someone else, of course, like you get to like work with a person that you really admire and
Hmm.
appreciate every day. But on top of that, you're tackling all of these challenges together.
Yeah.
And instead of challenges, because if you always think about like, oh, it's challenges, it's really hard to like operate on a day-to-day basis. So what you need to flip it as opportunities. I know it sounds
Right.
very like try like where people have talked about this before, but really like that shift in mindset makes a huge difference because
Mhm.
we were product managers before. Like it's completely true. Like a lot of the things that we're dealing with are absolutely new. Like we've never dealt with that before because we're building a product, working as product managers, and dealing with a
Yeah.
very small side of the company. But as founders, like you have to wear a lot of different hats. You have to do a lot of different things, and uh, like challenges change from like day to day basis. I'll tell you, like when we first started the company, the biggest focus was okay, like how do we hire an
Mhm.
engineer who can build alongside us? Yes, we can sling code, but we're not professional engineers. Like we need someone who really knows their stuff to
Right.
help us lead the way. Um, and of course, like hiring is always important. That's never going to change. Uh, so I would say, you know, uh, there's a lot of exciting opportunities right now. I mentioned earlier where we had this like crazy growth last year. That still
Hmm.
hasn't changed. So continue to grow that. And also, like last year, we're really focused on like growth and like finding product market fit. have strong product market fit now. Now it's really changing that, oh, okay, like that mindset of, hey, like, is this product working? Is this company working? To like, okay, how do we build like a company on top of it? How do we mature as a company? And
Hmm.
that's really exciting.
That's
I think,
amazing.
oh,
I
sorry.
guess for the background context, like how big is Jam? I mean, I know you guys are pretty good size, but talking about employees, talking about maybe funding, talking about customer sizing, like actually how big is Jam?
So 65,000, actually a little bit more, people that use Jam.
Mm-hmm.
People are uh, creating and debugging 175,000 jams, bugs every month. We crossed 1 million jams total created last year, which is super cool. And on the team size, the dream is to build a company like Instagram, be 13 people and worth $1 billion. We're just over 10,
Mm-hmm.
so we're about there on the people side, and now now we have the rest of the work to do. But really, we believe that small teams have an advantage over big teams, especially um, when you're competing against a giant. Like, we're never going to have as many people as Google in 2024, but we can have a lot more focus and we can work together in a more cohesive way than a whole big company can. And so we really think it's to our advantage. And so when you hire a small team, there are a few things that are very different than when you hire a big team. Like, when you hire a big team, you just sort of need more smart people. But when you hire a small team, you really care about the composition. Makes us think very differently when we're hiring. We're thinking every single person that joins the team needs to add a new perspective, new experiences, like new expertise. They need to round us out. It's not just about more smart people, but it's about what do they bring and how do we then like up level every time we add someone.
Yeah, absolutely. I like what you talked about earlier, that when you find a co-founder, you want to find somebody you admire, you enjoy working with, and you guys can divide and conquer doing the work together. So that's like the synergy we're talking about, right? But I do think sometimes conflicts are also healthy, right? So I'm curious. I would imagine, right, on a weekly basis, you guys probably don't align or agree with everything, right? You would have different perspective, maybe different vision, or maybe different, hiring decision, or plenty of disagreement. But how do you resolve these conflicts when you are disagreeing with each other as co-founders? What
This
is
is
your framework? What is your go-to strategy, right? I mean, you both are very logical, logical tech folks, right? So I imagine you have very strong reasoning from whichever background you come from. But if you guys are really not agreeing with each other, how do you get to a solution?
this is such an important question. Irtefa, do you want to? I'm
Yeah.
curious your thoughts, and I'll share too.
Uh, I remember when we first started the company, or like about to start the company. I don't, excuse me. I don't think we have incorporated yet.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but we knew that, like, okay, we're about to start a company. There's going to be something here.
Yeah.
One of the things we did was we wrote a Google Doc, like each of
Mm-hmm.
us wrote without showing to each other
Okay.
about the other person. So I wrote about Dani, what I admire about her, what I
Mm-hmm.
think she's really good at, and how she's gonna help this company be really, really successful. And I asked Dani to do the same thing. And the purpose of that exercise was, like a lot of the times, like as individuals, like we think we're good at something, but we're actually good at something else, and like the other person like sees that in you.
Yeah.
And when we were building a company together as co-founders, it's very important to have that clarity of who's good
Mm.
at what, so you can like trust each other on those things and really rely on each other. Uh, so that's what we did, and that's what really helped in the early days, and even now, to sort of uh, like delineate, like, okay, like Danny's going to work on this stuff, Irtifa is going to work on this stuff.
Mm.
This is where they need help, and this is where we could really level up each other, because we don't know everything. We're going to continue to grow and learn. That's what really helped. Now, that doesn't mean we don't have like conflicts. I think conflict is like a
Right.
very healthy thing, but how
Yeah.
you manage it is really, really important. Uh, Most of the time, uh, we discuss about one of
Mm.
the things that we don't agree on, and we express like why we don't agree on it. Uh,
Mm.
but after that, like we sort of gauge like who has the stronger opinion about the specific thing that we're talking about. And
Okay.
usually the person with the strongest opinion in that case like wins, and the other person sort of just trusts them, like, okay, I believe in like the decision that you're making. I don't agree with you completely, but I'm
Okay.
going to go through it with you. It's like similar to how like Jeff Bezos talks about like disagree and commit.
Good commit,
Uh,
right? Okay.
so
Yeah.
we do that a lot whenever that happens. But yeah, anything you want to add, Danny?
The disagree and commit is a value that Irtefa taught me, and I really believe in. It's like the only way forward is forward. We just got to try something, and most decisions are reversible. And so I think because we've explicitly talked about disagree and commit, thanks to Irtefa, it's easy to just be like, well, let's try and see what happens, and we can always change course.
Mm-hmm.
Um, one more thing that I think is really important. One thing that Irtifa started doing early on is every single time we have a one-on-one,
Mm.
at the end of the one-on-one, he asks for feedback, and then it prompts me to do
Oh,
the same thing. And I think that every co-founder pair should do this. And the reason is it allows you to air your grievances before they build up and become a big deal.
mm.
And the fact that you can like sort of like resolve small conflicts as you go each week, if there is something, which is rare, means that things don't balloon and become unmanageable. And it
Right.
means that when we do actually have like disagreements about something, it's actually only just about that one thing. There's no like complex history of 3 years of paper cuts underlying it. Like it's really just about the thing that we're discussing. But
Yes.
it's because every week we have that opportunity to like say something if something has started to come up.
That's such a great tip that you get feedback like each time you have one-on-one and then just resolve any mini conflict right there. Is there any recent examples that you two feel comfortable to share that there's like one sample of conflict that we disagree, and then here's how we drew a conclusion that the other party could actually disagree and commit?
Um, they're all so tactical and small. Like there was this like one like outreach message we were sending to users, and there were two ways we could like I don't know if it's anything that useful and interesting. I'll say that like one of the funny things about in a company is yes, sometimes you have big decisions, but most of
Mhm.
the decisions you make are small. And then
Okay.
and then as they add up, that creates who you are. I guess it's like being a person. Like most decisions you make in your life are actually quite small and day to day, but it's as they compound that it creates who you are and your personality and your values and like how you conduct yourself in the world. And I think that running a company is the same thing.
Mm.
Um, and so the actual conflicts are like, that I can come up with are also tiny. They're like not interesting for your audience.
Or Etifa, do you have any example? Let's say you want to hire this person, but then it disagrees, or
Oh,
something
I would say
similar.
here this is useful. I
Okay.
think if hiring is such a huge deal, it is a
Mm.
huge deal.
Yeah.
And the reason is if you get it wrong, it's not only painful for the company,
Yeah.
it's unfair to that person. It sucks. You kind
Mm.
of want people say um like hire fast, fire fast. Um, but that's like building a big team mentality, right? And if you're
Yeah.
building a small team, each person that joins has an outsized impact on how we do things at Jam. And so
Right. Right.
you
Yeah.
actually want to hire quite carefully. If Irtifa
That's
and I
true. That's
disagree
true.
on a hire, that
Yeah,
person is
Etifa, have
yeah.
you encountered scenarios like this that you want to hire somebody or you don't want to hire somebody, and Danny has a different uh, opinion?
That's the easiest one to resolve. If we have a
Yeah.
Really?
veto, we don't hire that person. Yeah.
That's true.
Like
That's true. That's a
like
difference.
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
all need to be bought in 100%. Like Danny said, we're a small team. Like each additional person is like a significant percentage of the company when you think about it,
That's
and
Yes.
they
true.
sort of like set the culture of the company. People talk about like, okay, what is your culture? Like, have you written the culture values? At the end of the day, it's what people do, and what your
Yeah.
earlier hires, what they're doing,
Yeah.
incredibly important. This is like the easiest one to resolve
That's
because we're
true.
like,
That's
okay,
true.
if there's like this is something that we agreed on early on, like, oh, okay, if this happens, this is how we resolve this conflict. It's like if there's a veto, we're not gonna pursue
Mm-hmm.
this candidate, because from our experience, like when it comes to hiring, if our gut says this is not right, even on paper, everything looks perfect, we trust our guts.
Right. Okay. Okay. That's a good point, right? If there's a no, it probably is a no, right? There's like some reason underlying that. Okay,
Gosh,
that's
and like what
good.
person wants to join a company where not everyone is 100% excited about them being there? Like it's easy on all fronts to say like we want every single person who joins to know that like we are all 11 out of 10 like thrilled for them to be there, like no disagreement, you know?
Yeah, that's true. That's a good point. Yeah. So switching gears a little bit, what some advice do you guys have for product managers who aspire to be founders?
Yeah. What I would say is like product is this unique role, right, Young? Like
Mhm.
where you are working not only your product with like engineers and designers, but you're working in a very cross-functional fashion where you're working with multiple teams. You're
Mhm.
working with like support, you're working with marketing, you're working with legal,
Yeah,
uh, and you're sort of like in the middle working with all these incredibly smart and talented people. When you are in that role, uh, try to like shadow as much as possible how others are doing their work, even if they're not in product engineering or design,
mm,
because chances are very high when you start a company, you're gonna be doing those jobs by yourself at first, at
true,
least.
true. Yeah.
If you can't shadow them, if you can like hop on a call with them and try to understand how they're doing their work and how you can best support them, that will give you a lot of like perspective about one day when you have to do this job, how that would look like and what a great hire in this position looks like. That's really important too, because you have to hire these people. Another thing I would say is, uh, again, like you have this like blessed role where you get to work with so many amazing people. Build good relationships with them. Like
Mm,
stay in touch because there's a pretty good chance you're gonna hire those people in your company. They were colleagues before, but now they'll be in your team working for your
mhm.
startup. Uh, so yeah, like do those two things, and you'll have a really easy time. I would say easier time building a company. Danny,
That's
do you
a
want to add anything?
I think that's perfectly stated. That I wish I had spent more time, especially trying to understand how great marketers do their job. Learning
yeah.
that on the job is a little bit more stressful than learning it at a previous job.
That's true. I like that just like absorbing the functions that are adjacent to yours. You might not do the PMM or legal person's job, but you're gonna do something related to that front when you're a founder. That is true. So if you want to have an easier time later on, you might want to spend some time earlier on, right? Okay, that makes sense. Um, so now we have some rapid fire questions. Two questions. The first one is, what is your favorite non-jam productivity tool?
Irtefa
And
and
then
I
I
were
know,
talking about, oh yeah,
yeah, sorry, yeah, go ahead. Because I know Irtefa and I, we both have kids, right? So life is just insane sometimes. And then, so I'm curious how other people manage their time. How do you remain productive while being a founder, co-founder, running a company together?
Yeah, it's a challenge.
Mhm.
But Danny and I were just talking about this before this call. It's like I think both of us we really love Apple Notes. It's
Apple.
simple, it's
Okay.
super fast, it's super easy to use, it's always there. Um, and like one of the things I learned, being a co-founder, and on top of that, like being a parent who's like involved in the household stuff, it's really hard to like remember all of the things. So
Yes.
I just write everything down in my Apple Notes so that I never forget them. And if I have to remind myself later, I'll just absolutely make sure to carve out some time using Google Calendar.
Hmm.
And uh, it's funny, like I was about to say like communicate to my stakeholders, but it's like at the company level, it's the company people, but it's my wife when it comes to home, so
Yes.
she's my stakeholder. So over
Yes.
communicate on those fronts, like how we're spending time, and that really helps.
I see. Yeah. What about you, Danny?
I Apple Notes is just it's such an aspirational productivity tool. Like that's the simplicity and speed. It's invisible to you. It fades into the background and allows you to do your work. Like that's that's the design principle like we aim for at Jam. I just admire it as a product.
I see. Do you guys have shared notes? I mean, because I don't use Apple Notes, I use Notion because I have an Android, I have a Pixel phone, so that kind of really sync pretty well. But what are some like productivity tips you have if you both love Apple Notes so much? Like, do you have a folder for just like Jam folder and then family folder and then like travel folder? The kind of how do you manage?
I have Jam folder and like Self folder.
Mm-hmm.
Apple Notes, we actually use it separately. It's like our own personal like space, and then all of
Oh,
the company collaborative stuff happens in Notion or Google Docs, sort of depending.
okay. Got
We've got productivity tips for teams. One thing that we do often at Jam is we retro every project and to see how do we learn to work better as a team. Like the ultimate product of the company is the company itself and how well we're able to tackle challenges or do things.
it. Mm-hmm.
And so there are a couple of things that we do as a company that we found works really, really well for us to deliver stuff out the door fast,
Mm.
that we'd be happy to share. Okay, so here's one. It's going to sound really silly, but for us, it's game changing.
Okay.
So, and it's about how we do timelines for projects.
Okay.
So, engineer sets the timeline. It
Mm.
goes in Google Calendar. And we send an invite to everyone who needs to know, all the stakeholders. Like if marketing's going to do an announcement, marketing needs to know.
Yeah. Yeah.
If QA is going to QA it, QA needs to know, right? So everyone knows it's on the calendar. And then as we work up to the calendar, there is a drumbeat of the engineer saying whether we are green, which is definitely on track,
Mm.
yellow, which means like, I think we're on track, or red, like we're off track. And then if we're off track, we either have like a conversation about like where to reduce scope or set a new date.
Mm.
And the reason why this drumbeat is so helpful is because it forces the conversations that otherwise wouldn't happen. And so oftentimes in a company, like, projects will slip.
Yeah.
But with this system, projects don't slip. Instead, you make deliberate decisions along the way, whether to change the timeline because we want to go above and beyond on quality, like we really
Mm.
care about getting the details, or if we want to reduce the scope or we want to put more people on it. And
Mm.
that deliberate decision making makes us so much more productive as a team. Anyway, that's one thing you can do
I love
as a
that.
team to be super productive.
Yeah. Yeah. Artifact, do you have any productivity hack? I mean, you're a busy man, right? You have a kid, you have a full-time job, and then there's like so much going on in life. How do you stay productive using Apple Notes?
Um, you know, it's gonna be weird, but it's basically more like a productivity like mindset. So
Okay.
if you like, I would recommend everyone to read the book Getting Things Done. And over there, like, the author talks about a system of how to like manage like your inbox.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and I think The Great CEO Within is another book where they sort of like simplify and summarize getting
Yeah.
things done principles. Uh, so like follow that. Like, and I think applying that to like your inbox, that really helps.
Mm.
Um, yeah, honestly, like you don't need like fancy tools. Like for
True.
personal productivity, you don't need fancy tools. You just need a
True.
system that works for you. And if you get a dopamine hit from like switching to a different tool, exactly,
Yeah.
switching to a different tool, that's okay. That's
Yeah.
fine. But just make sure like, you're not dropping the ball.
That's true. Yeah. I mean, I use like pen and paper. I have like the planners. I write down my to-dos like for family, for myself. But that's a good point. It's about having that mindset. If you know your system, how it makes you really enjoy the flow, it doesn't matter what tools you use, right? Like if you keep track of your own system, that keep yourself accountable. That makes sense. All right. One last question. If you guys still have time to enjoy TV shows or books, which I don't know if you do because you guys are very busy co-founders, but if you do, what are some recommendations you have? Any recent TV shows or books that you really enjoy?
I just finished Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow. It's just such a great read.
Mm. What makes it so great? What's like one takeaway you have?
It's a beautiful book about friendship. It's fiction. It takes you to a new world. It's lovely. Read it.
Nice. All right. I'll add it on my Goodreads list. Sounds good. What about you, Atifa?
You know, uh, it's gonna have a very similar theme. So I think for your audience who's like building products or one
Mm.
day going to build companies, um, people should definitely watch like the movie Social Network, Wolf of
Yeah.
Wall Street. TV shows like *Halt and Catch Fire*. And the reason for that is not about, I think people focus a lot on like the things that go bad or like the toxic traits or the backstabbing. It's not really about that.
Uh-huh.
When you watch those movies or shows, the part that's really exciting about it is seeing the early days and then seeing
Mm,
how they grow and grow really big. As a founder, or like a founder's aspiring to build something similar, like nothing's
mm,
more exciting than like seeing someone else do it and like get like a dramatic view of it. And I think that's really exciting. I think I get a huge kick out of like watching that. Uh, yeah, in terms of book, as a founder, you have to learn a lot of things, and things will constantly change. Uh, this book that really sort of like helped me like reset of like how we should think about things is it's an old book. It's called Mindset by Carol Dweck. Uh, like we've all been in this position where, at least like I was growing up, like I was told like, oh, you're not actually good at blank. And like a lot of the times, like when you were growing up, especially in like South Asia, like when you're a woman, you'll be told like, hey, like you're not good at math, and that basically
yeah,
stops
yeah.
women from going into engineering and technical fields. Uh, Everyone should read this book. I think every parent should read this book to
Mm,
not to say things like that. And as a founder, where you have to like learn constantly and grow with the company, you need that sort of mindset that, hey, okay, you know what? When I first do it, it's not going to be that great. That's okay.
mm.
But like before, you should not tell yourself no before someone else does.
Wow. Amen. That's awesome. I agree 100%. I feel like that again. That's like a parenting advice too. You're only bad at something you tell yourself you're bad at, right? Like, wow, that's true. I'm gonna tell my kid for that. That's a very good point. Thank you so much for your time, Dani and Irtefa. I'm gonna stop recording right now.
Thanks for having us.